Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, everyone. How are you? This is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thanks for being here today. I have a 3-time returning guest with me today. Andrea Owen is on, and we are diving deep, y'all. We are talking about how to unlearn our patriarchal conditioning. This is no joke. And we have an amazing conversation, and we talk a lot about the steps of unlearning, and she shares 4 really specific steps. And I love it when my guests share like very practical takeaway things that we can start doing right away. And then we also have conversation about what it means to change and how we can stop being motivated by shame. I mean, we go deep. This is such a great conversation. And if you want to take a listen to Andrea's past episodes that she's been on with me, you can go back into the In Her Voice archives and hit up episode 66 and 164. And we have great conversations there too. So let me tell you a little bit about Andrea. Andrea Owen is an author, global speaker, and professional certified life coach who helps high-achieving women maximize unshakable confidence and master resilience. She has taught hundreds of thousands of women tools and strategies to be able to empower themselves to live their most kick-ass life through speaking, her books, coaching, and her wildly popular podcast with over 3 million downloads. She is the proud author of 2 books, which have been translated into 18 languages and available in 22 countries. Her latest book, Make Some Noise, Speak Your Mind and Own Your Strength, came out in August of 2021. When she's not juggling her full coaching practice or writing books, Andrea is busy riding her Peloton bike, and you can guarantee that we do that together sometimes, chasing her 2 school-age children or making out with her husband, Jason. She is also a retired roller derby player, having skated under the name Veronica Vane, which I think we talked about in the first episode that she was on In Her Voice. This is a discussion not to be missed by any woman walking the face of the earth, if you ask me. I hope that you get a lot out of it and enjoy it as much as I did. Let's get right to it with Andrea. Welcome back to In Her Voice, Andrea. I am super stoked to have this conversation with you. How are you today?
I am so happy to be here, Kelly. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. And a huge congrats to you for your 3rd book, which we're going to be talking about today. I think it's the 3rd one, right?
It is. Yes, you're correct.
Make Some Noise, Speak Your Mind, and Own Your Strength. And I have been digging in a little bit, and I mean, I feel like this could be 2 hours. Do you have the time?
I do. Actually, I don't have anybody else for another few hours.
Okay.
And I agree with you. There's a lot to unpack with this book.
For sure. So why don't you just start with giving maybe some background on why? Like, why did you feel you needed to write this book?
The idea started brewing about 2015, 2016 when I was writing my 2nd book, and which I've been on your show to talk about. And there's a very small section in that book where I was actually talking about negative self-talk and how people ask me, where does this come from? Where does this inner critic come from? And there's a few different things, variables that contribute to your negative self-talk. And one of it is our culture. You know, for women, our culture, and this isn't to say men don't have their challenges from the culture we're all raised in. They do. But it's gender specific. and I specialize in women. And so typically we're raised to feel fundamentally insecure, to feel not enough, to, and this is what leads us to people please and perfectionism and numbing out and isolating, among other things. And so I left it at that in that second book. And then when that was all said and done and some things were happening culturally and socially over the last handful of years, I had a deep knowing that I could not talk about women's empowerment anymore without also talking about the culture that raised us, because in my opinion, it is much of the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that I'm guessing most of the people that are listening to this podcast now would be shaking their heads in agreement with you or nodding. I never know if it's nodding or shaking, but whatever it means,
I think shaking
yes.
is no, nodding is yes.
Okay. So nodding their heads in agreement. Yes. Like, yes, I feel this. But could you maybe give us some specific examples just so we know we're all on the same page when we're talking about this culture that has created a world where women aren't standing up for themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're raised, and I'm speaking generally here, but there's research that shows that even as little babies, parents talk to baby boys differently than they talk to baby girls, even the most progressive of parents. And it's super fascinating, but generally speaking, young girls and women are brought up to always be polite and put everyone else's comfort before their own, never make people uncomfortable, to be accommodating and flexible, to and also, it morphs into our appearance too. Like, we are valued based on our body size, by our appearance. Youth is a major currency for women and can be a shame trigger. And so, again, it's generally speaking, and it depends on the woman. It also depends on her race, on her ability, on her sexual orientation. There's a lot of different variables that are involved in kind of how much or how little she's impacted by the culture. But for the most part, what I say is, like, we all drank the Kool-Aid, the culture Kool-Aid, because it was the only beverage that was offered. There typically wasn't anything else that was offered, so we all grew up this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as we start to dive in to this, understanding of the world that we've been raised in, right? Of the Kool-Aid that we drank, involuntarily. Like, we didn't have a choice. This is what we had. This is what we knew. But as we start to unravel all of that, and I feel like for me, this has really happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, I'm starting to see how so many things that I consider to be just like the right way to do something, or, like truth, deep truth, comes from this place of a man 200 years ago or 100 years ago or 50 years ago deciding what it should be.
Mm-hmm. Wrote the rules, basically. And yeah.
I get so mad. I have so much anger. And then I go back to this, what you just said about like how we're taught as women to be nice and to not make a scene and to not get angry and to stuff that down. And I just want to give us all permission right now in this moment just to be really mad about that. What does your anger look like?
Yeah. I so love that you pointed this out, because for a second I thought you were going to say, let's just give ourselves permission to make some noise and, take up space. And I was going to say, yes, and there's other things that we need to do. One of those things is exactly what you said, is be angry about it. And there's this sort of identity shift, if you will, identity unraveling, identity awakening that many of us have when we realize that it is not all as it seems. It's sort of smoke and mirrors, and many people feel lied to. And it's a grieving process for many. And this isn't to blame and shame our parents and single them out. They did the best they could with what they had. And I do feel like generationally, we are experiencing a sort of reckoning. And with that reckoning comes a lot of feelings and emotions. And also, I don't know about you, Kelly, but I'm 46, so I've been there. And in my 20s, especially, I would feel these things, like even things like street harassment, and I would push back and I would yell back at men who harassed me. And there was real risk there. There was real risk there. And I'm like, oh my God, like, am I going to get assaulted? And that's just one example of the risk that we face when we push back, or when we do make a scene, when we do get angry, because it sort of goes against these social norms. And I'm using air quotes over here when I say social norms, because they're not okay. Right. So I went off on a little tangent there, but I just was I wanted to mention like what this whole process is like.
Yeah. Well, and what I've been finding for myself is the more I unravel, that's the word that I've been using for all of this, the more sort of untethered I feel. Like I don't feel grounded in what I know is the right way to do things anymore. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Can you give me an example so I don't go off on another topic?
Yeah. Sure. Here's a really good example. So I am so tired of trying to make my body look a certain way because women are supposed to be small, like that beautiful means skinny, or it means that your body has to be a certain size, or even that healthy means that your body has to be a certain size. Right. I find it to be really frustrating. And I'm starting to recognize that like literally so much of my life's energy has been spent thinking about what food I'm going to eat and how much I'm going to exercise, all to attain this goal of having a body or keeping a body that is a certain size. And so as I allow myself to not use all of my energy for that, and I've put on some weight while I've done this, I then struggle with like, okay, well, before when I gained weight, what I would do is X, Y, Z. These were the steps that I would take to alleviate the quote unquote problem. And now I haven't quite figured out how to not see it as a problem, number one. And number two, not understand how to fix it. Do you know what I mean? So like 100%. It feels like I'm completely untethered in this place of like, okay, I'm just floating along and I don't know how to take action on the things that are really important.
I love this topic and simultaneously hate that it's even a topic. And okay, so I'm gonna tell you like a few different feelings I have around it, because you asked me, how does my anger show up? Yeah. There's on social media, there's especially on TikTok, which I know people are listening are like, why are you on TikTok? I love TikTok, and it's not just 13-year-olds dancing. There's like micro niches, and it's super fascinating. But there's this whole movement of, body positivity and body liberation, which I love even more. And there's I follow some young women, and these women are probably in their early 20s. And they are in larger bodies, and they're in their two-piece bathing suits, just owning it. And also it's part of sort of their brand, if you will. Like, this is what they're doing. This is what they're talking about. And there's a part of me, I'm really on the fence, because on one hand, I'm very much like fist pumping and like, yes, I'm so happy that this is changing, that this is starting to change, because it does take generations for cultures to make these real, these social shifts. And I'm so excited that my almost 12-year-old daughter is going to grow up differently than I did, because I came of age in the 90s when it was like heroin chic, and then, early 2000s where it was Paris Hilton and these, the Olsen twins, just very, very thin. And there's also a part of me that's so angry that this is 2 decades too late for me. And how much my life would have been different. Yeah. How much energy I could have put somewhere else to the hours and hours and hours that I spent obsessing and calorie restricting and all of these things. So it's both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There's room for both of those experiences and emotions to happen. And, it's complicated. Like when I have several friends who are going, and these are women in their 40s and 50s who are finally at the place where they're okay, being at a different weight than they've been their whole lives, being in somewhat larger bodies, but also going back and forth in panic and having moments of like, oh my God, I've dieted chronically most of my life, and to not do that anymore feels like an out-of-body experience, no pun intended, but it's complicated. Like, and I don't mean to simplify it, but it really truly is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that what really strikes me, and this is just one example that we're talking about. I mean, this can, we could talk about this in regards to people pleasing, in regards to, what you wear,
right,
in regards to like how you use your voice, how you use your body,
our relationship with money. Yeah.
All of these things. Right. So this is just one example, but I think, we get to this point of like, okay, well, I'm on the train. Like I'm with you. I'm with you, Andrea. And now what do I do?
Right. It's a lot to unpack. And that's really, I love this question, because that's really the gist of this whole book isn't as much prescriptive as it is. There is definitely some, like, I like to equip people with a metric SHIT ton of tools.
You can say it.
Okay. I never know. Like, I always forget. And I'm like, a metric shit ton of tools. And with this particular book, and I asked this question from the beginning, is I want the reader to ask themselves, what is my conditioning versus what is my truth? And if you can sit with that question anytime you hesitate to give your opinion at the dinner table at Thanksgiving, anytime you are thinking about going on a diet again because you've gained 15 pounds over COVID, and anything. And I'm not asking you to really take massive action. I'm just asking you to think about your conditioning. And on the other side of that, what is your truth? Because sometimes that is not an easy question to answer.
No, it isn't, because sometimes what we think are our truths have come to be truths because of our conditioning.
Exactly. That's what I want people to unravel.
Yeah. And it takes courage, wouldn't you say?
100%. It takes a metric shit ton of courage and massive vulnerability. And sometimes that vulnerability looks like journaling. Sometimes it looks like just sort of meditating on the question, or talking to your therapist about it, or talking to your closest friends when you're at brunch about these deeper conversations. And I just hope people take the plunge and do it, because that's what I want. When I talk about, I want women to learn how to empower themselves. It's not about me empowering you. It's about you asking yourself the right questions to be able to empower yourself.
That's right. That's right. And I love powerful questions, because powerful questions yield to powerful answers. So in your book, you talk about unlearning all of the things that our culture has taught us. And you give 4 steps. Can you take us through those 4 steps of unlearning?
Yeah. And the reason I put emphasis on that word is because, my previous books have been about learning new tools and awareness and things like that. And that's all still incredibly helpful. But for this particular topic, we have decades of programming and learning that we've already established, and we need to unlearn some of that. So the 4 steps, and the first one is to notice, to pay attention. And this is when you are doing things, the examples that we just gave, when you are thinking about going on another diet, not because you have high cholesterol, but because you've gained some weight and you don't like the way that it looks, or, society tells you should be smaller. Notice when you are judging another woman because of her sexual choices, or her, maybe this woman is talking about a promotion that she got, and you're kind of judging her for that, or whatever. Just notice. That's it. The second step is curiosity. Because
can I just say something
jump
really
in.
quick about the noticing? I think that a good sort of red flag word, if you're noticing, is to notice when you say the word should, because that's going to point you in those directions of the things that you think you must do to belong or to fit in. So when you find the word should coming up, either applied to you or yourself, that's when you can notice and be like, is that really true?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it is, like I should brush my teeth. Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of times you're absolutely right. Like the shoulding, it can be for sure a red flag.
Yeah.
So after that comes curiosity, because many times when we do start to notice, we immediately try to close the loop and put a label on it. It's good or bad, and it doesn't have to be. So just get curious. I wonder why I am judging her for telling me that she had a one-night stand. I wonder why I am too afraid to talk to my partner about the division of labor at home. I wonder why I haven't raised my rates in 10 years. So it's just about asking yourself, what about that is important? Why do you think you do that? Where do you think that stems from? Just curiosity. That's it. And then after that is self-compassion, because many times what stems from curiosity is we beat ourselves up for it.
We're really good at that, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. We all are. We all have a negativity bias. It's part of the human experience. And sometimes we beat ourselves up for beating ourselves up, which is like, oh, geez. So no one gets to a place of betterment without a healthy dose of self-compassion. And that for many is a lifelong process. And then the fourth step is what I call keep the momentum. And many times that looks like having a conversation with someone, talking to your therapist about it, listening to you and I talk about it, and doing some journaling. So it's definitely not a one and done. And you put the book down and you can move on with your life, and everything is different. It's a lifelong, I'm in my 40s. And so I've had a minute to learn one way. It's going to take another minute to unlearn it.
For sure. I'm 47. So we're right in sort of the same time of life. And I look, like you said, you're about those, people in their 20s who are, rocking the bikinis regardless of the size of their body, and really representing this strong woman who's proud of who she is, right? I think a lot about like, well, what would have happened if I had figured that out when I was 20? And I think that is time wasted. Because I needed all of the things that I went through to get to where I am now. And I'm just going to be excited that more and more girls and women are coming to this even sooner, rather than have a regret that I did not know about it sooner, or beat myself up that I didn't figure it out sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of inner child work, and anytime, this is kind of off topic, but it points to what you were saying. Anytime I find myself getting tripped up, like in a loop on the same thing, I wonder what that sort of edge is. And for me personally, I don't think this is with everybody, but for me personally, what it often points to is something that happened at a certain age. And if I close my eyes or talk to my therapist about it, I often come to the conclusion that like that 17-year-old in me is still really effing pissed. And that's the work that I need to. And I also should mention, I come to anger easily. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, and I can access it probably easier than a lot of women, which is a whole nother topic about anger and women. And I've done a lot of research on it. It's fascinating, the relationship with women and anger. But I think that there are some of us who can access it and process it quicker. And I'm one of those people. So I get so angry, and it's inner child stuff. It's inner child stuff.
Well, so, okay, speaking of inner child, because I also really love inner child work. In fact, on my desk right here in my studio, I have a picture of myself and my grandma when I think I was maybe 3. And I keep it here to remind myself of who I am.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot lately about the word change. And even in your book, in the beginning of the book, you talk a lot about changing. And I feel that for me, I have started to not use that word as much, because when I apply it to myself and the journey that I'm on, because what I'm understanding more and more is that I have been changing all along. Like, that's what I changed myself to fit in. Mm-hmm. I made myself look a certain way. I said the right things. I did what I was supposed to do. That was actually change. And now what I think that I'm doing is actually just allowing myself to be me. Mm-hmm. And so the word change feels, I mean, I get why it's changing. We're changing from who we are now to who we want to be, but it feels like so much work, and it feels like, I don't know, there's some judgment there. Like, I've been doing it wrong and now I have to change. Can you tell me about that?
I love a good conversation about semantics.
Well, and words, for whatever reason, to me, really matter.
They do
really
matter.
Yeah.
100%. And I love it when people tell me things like this, because it gives me a different perspective about things. And like, there are some words that get thrown around in our field that I don't like. And so I love this conversation. I actually love the word evolve. To me, evolve means that you are changing for the better. Whereas I totally understand why, you don't love the word change. And honestly, like, that word, we kind of lump everything around personal development into that word.
Right.
And it doesn't always fit. And there's not everybody that likes it. So I absolutely love that. I resonate with that word. Like, when I think about who I was in my former marriage and like how I used to communicate, like, I have changed for the better. Like, I am not that person anymore. So for me, it's both. I've changed and evolved.
Yeah. Well, and I feel that way too. So I think when I'm looking from the past forward, I can say honestly that I've changed, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But I think looking from the present to future, that's where it shifts for me, where I, instead of feeling like I need to change or I should change, really what I want to do is just be who I am.
Right.
But the who is not the who that I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. The who is like this little girl in this picture on my desk.
Yeah, we need a word for that.
Yeah. And I just lately, I've just been allowing, like, I don't have the right word. Mm-hmm. I just know that the change doesn't feel exactly right. Mm-hmm. And this different feeling that I'm talking about feels exciting and inviting. And it feels like also I have so much grace for who I am today. It's not about like, oh, I need to be better. Mm-hmm. Because that implies that we've done something wrong. It's really about, no, I just need to be me, because when I'm me, I allow all of those things. I allow the rage. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge and let myself want things. I mean, let's just talk about desire for a second.
Yeah. Well, I want to circle back to one thing that you said, because this conversation is so interesting. And yes, let's talk about desire. I love that you, and if you could get right on that, coming up with a better word for that.
Okay, I'll put it on my list.
What stuck out to me is how you don't, and forgive me if I'm kind of misquoting you, but like that you don't like it feeling like you have to be better than who you are. Mm-hmm. Is that, did I understand that right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes into this idea of enoughness, because if I say that right now, today, I am enough, I am worthy as I am, period, then the implication is I do not need to do anything different.
Right.
But I think we both know that in order to continue to evolve, there will be things that I need and want to do differently. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really gray area.
Totally. And the way I see it is, Okay, so from my personal experience, I'm just going to speak from that because that's all I know in terms of this conversation. I look back, and even though I didn't feel that way at the time, like I've always been inherently enough as a human, just always, and everyone is, no matter what. But my behavior needed to be better. But also at the same time, my behavior was not necessarily my fault, my not so great behavior. And it was based on previous trauma, on, the tools I didn't have, a lack of emotional intelligence, etc. So for a while, I had shame about that. Like I was embarrassed of how I had behaved before. And true, some of it I needed to make some amends with people, which I have done. But it's taken me, I think probably like maybe 7 or 8 years or so ago, I did some real work around accepting and forgiving my behavior from 2 decades ago, even 3 decades ago, and that really changed everything. So it was sort of like accepting myself as a whole and making room for my behavior. Many times there's room for improvement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think just asterisk, the improvement doesn't mean like that what you did before was bad.
Right.
Or wrong.
I did my best. And sometimes it was crappy.
That's exactly right. You did your best. And I think that's the asterisk is what we forget.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
There's so much nuance.
Yeah. And I'm just really glad that we dove into this because so often I see women struggle with this and I almost feel like they are strangely motivated by shame.
Oh, we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be motivated by shame.
I know how to not be motivated by shame. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, one of my favorite exercises, and we're going to get to desire. Like I do want to talk about that.
Oh, don't worry. I didn't forget.
One of my favorite exercises is so I'm trained and certified in the work of Dr. Brene Brown, and it's called The Daring Way is the modality that she has created. And one of the exercises in there is called Ideal and Unwanted Identities. So all of us, all humans have ways that we ideally want to be perceived by others. And we also have ways that we would never want to be perceived by others. So the easiest way to explain this is if you sort of break apart sections of your life. And so let's just keep it super simple and say, like, as a podcaster, you, Kelly, have ways that you want to be perceived by your audience. Like, I'm going to just throw out a wild guess and say you want to be perceived as organized and insightful, intelligent, professional.
Sure.
Right? Okay. And unwanted identities might be the opposite of that, essentially.
Yes.
And we have these in the areas of, if you are in a relationship, as a partner, if you are a mother, at your job, all the different areas, and they can get pretty nuanced. The problem is that we don't have any control how other people perceive us. That's the problem.
Yep.
And inevitably, because we are human and because we don't have control how other people perceive us, we are going to fall into one of those unwanted identities. Maybe you make a mistake, you say the wrong thing on a podcast episode, you get like a not so great review or whatever it is. And for some people who don't know what their triggers are, because that's what the unwanted identities are. There are triggers. When we fall into one of those unwanted identities, we tend to try harder to get to our ideal identities. This is the birthplace of perfectionism. And so what Brene says when she's, in the guidelines when we're doing this exercise is she says, whether you know it or not, whether you know your unwanted identities or not, they're driving the bus. It's just a part of the human experience. So the solution is to know what yours are, is to be intimate with them. Know what your triggers are to the best of your ability so that when inevitably you do fall into one of those, you can recognize it quickly.
Yeah.
And practice self-compassion. Or reach out to a friend if you made a mistake or something really difficult happens, instead of falling down into the rabbit hole of shame and striving for perfectionism.
I love it. That felt like a little bonus episode within
little mini
episode.
Like that exercise, there's 12 total exercises, and that one is by far my favorite and can totally change someone's life. It changed my life.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that would take a good journal session,
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the homework I give to clients is I tell them, break down all the different areas of your life, like all your identities basically that you have as a human in your life. And then it's also helpful sometimes to start with your unwanted identities because we typically know those very
Oh,
quickly.
for sure. Bad mom.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be seen as like frenetic and like helicopter
Lazy,
mom.
like
Oh
all of
yeah.
the things. Oh yeah. Well, and what's fascinating is even without knowing that exercise, I can recognize how really owning that sometimes I'm a bad mom.
Yeah, same.
Like sometimes I am.
Yeah.
And that is normal. Like that is true of every single mother. Like no mother can be like perfect mother all of the time. And that has allowed me to not be triggered by it. So like even without knowing the exercise, the work has been done. And probably those of you who are listening feel the same way, but definitely this is worth diving into. For sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the motherhood thing is so hard. I was watching a really insightful parenting video, and there was a woman who was talking about how so many of us who are interested in this kind of work, we have children and we get really clear on the things that we needed as either children or teenagers or even like adult children that our parents didn't give us. And we're like, okay, I'm going to raise my kids different. And I'm going to, kind of fill in the void that I didn't have filled, that my parents didn't do. Mm-hmm. And then we have children that aren't mini versions of us.
Mm-hmm. And inevitably they don't want all of that
and they
stuff.
They don't necessarily need it. Or it's something else that they need that we can't deliver.
Yeah.
And it's not our fault. And the whole point of her video was that most likely our children are going to experience some form of trauma from us that we did not intend. And I have just kind of gotten okay with that. Like I half jokingly say like, my kids are going to end up in therapy talking about me. I know they are. Mm-hmm. I do the best that I can.
That's
right.
I
have a lot of tools and still I mess up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Parenthood is such a great teacher.
Oh God.
Well, before we finish up, I do want to get back to desire because to me, it feels a lot like anger. It's this thing.
Ooh, say more.
That women don't let themselves feel mm-hmm. or they don't acknowledge because, what happens when you start saying you want all of these things and you make that a priority in your life? People might say that you're selfish or whatever. And so it's another, I almost feel it's like something that we tamp down because we want people to think a certain thing of us.
100%. And what's interesting is probably 10 years ago, I was doing a workshop and I was a baby coach back then. And it was I was taking the women through a visualization and asking them what they wanted and to visualize what they wanted. And when the visualization was done, I had one woman sheepishly raise her hand and say, I didn't see anything. I don't know what I want. And a lot of these women were the moms of small children at the time. And many of them agreed with her. And I thought, oh, okay, I have some more work to do because this is interesting that this is coming up. And I feel like that's a common experience. Mm-hmm. And so just to kind of throw out a quick exercise for people to do who feel that way is a lot of times we can clarify what it is that we don't want any more of. And it might be stress. It might be tasks. It might be, lack of alone time, like maybe they don't actually want date night with their partner, but they want a night to themselves. And it's so interesting. I had a personal epiphany. So my husband left his job last year to be the stay-at-home parent. We had planned it out. And I noticed how much time he was making for himself. And I work from home. So I notice. Mm-hmm. And most of the things that would be done around the house, and then he would like sit down to watch Game of Thrones. And I'm like, I would never
like, turn the TV on in the middle of the day. And then a few months ago, he bought an electric skateboard that he's so excited about. And he takes our kids to school and he said, I'm going to
I'm going to go ride my skateboard at the park after I dropped the kids off. And I was impressed at his just ability to do what he wanted. And I asked him about it. And I said, I'm super curious about this because I would never. And he admitted to me, he's like, I did feel a little bit guilty about it only because I knew that you were judging me a little bit. And I was like, I was. And I love that I can have these candid conversations with him. But I tell that story because and I don't mean to genderize this, but be gender specific, but I'm going to for a second here because generally speaking, men tend to have an easier time embracing and going after what makes them happy and making themselves a priority simply because they have been raised to do so.
That's right.
And we haven't.
That's right. That's right. And the only way to start prioritizing our own desires is to start prioritizing our own desires.
Yeah. And I think it can be helpful to unpack the internal work too,
Sure.
because he and I had to have some very frank conversations about gender roles and our expectations. And I had to actively be unattached and not mad at him because he was raised in the same culture that I was. And I was on like the shitty end of it, but it's not his fault, you know,
right.
and we both were raised in families where both parents worked. So it's not like, he had examples of, the 1950s June Cleaver or anything like that, but still we're both Gen Xers. We were both raised to understand that even if both parents work, the primary caregiver is the mom. And she does most of the household tasks and the operations of the household. Mm-hmm. And so, I knew I couldn't have a healthy conclusion or come to any kind of good systems if I was pissed off the whole time and mad at him.
Yes.
So it's been interesting and hard at times, but actually brought us closer, and it's been good work for both of us.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're practicing your steps. Like your step number 2 of unlearning is be curious. Ask those questions like, I wonder why I think that I can't turn the TV on in the middle of the day,
right? If
I want to. Like that's, and I confess to having many of those same sort of notions, if you will, that my day has to look a certain way.
Right.
Even though I am working and even though I am taking care of the kids or whatever, this is not about saying women shouldn't be stay-at-home moms. This is about understanding what you personally want. Like what do you want? How do you want to feel? What do you want your day-to-day life to look like? And making choices that allow you to prioritize that.
Yeah. And I mean, just yesterday I had a couple hours break in the middle of the day, and I did have some tasks on my to-do list for work, but they weren't urgent. And I was tired, so I went and I laid down. And that's my version of turning the TV on in the middle of the day. I prefer to either just go lay down or go read a book. And I'll tell you what, Kelly, that is feels revolutionary and
that's
glorious
progress
at the same time and uncomfortable.
And rebellious.
100%.
Right? You're bucking the rules because the rules that we know, right, that we were taught said you can't do that.
Yeah. And I think of Peggy Bundy in Married with Children and, her sitting on the couch with her legs crossed, eating bonbons, and Al Bundy getting mad at her, and the stereotype of the lazy housewife or the lazy mom. Again, that goes back to the unwanted identities, right? We don't want to be perceived that way. And then that elicits shame. And so it is practice. It is having hard conversations, exactly what you said, getting curious and asking yourself some hard questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't wait to finish. I started the book. I have not finished it. It is so good already. I am ready to step even more into this idea that as women, we need to make some noise. And I'm so grateful that you listen to your inner voice when she asked this of you, and that you had the courage to do it, because we need guides like you in our lives, showing us the way and lighting the path in front of us as we go. So thank you.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And I want to just say one thing quickly, that making noise doesn't necessarily have to be about, giving your opinion on social media, speaking up for yourself, having hard conversations. Making noise is also laying down and taking a nap in the middle of the day. That's right. Mm-hmm. It looks like a lot of different things, and it's pushing back on these stereotypes and assumptions that we have of what it means to be a good woman.
Yeah. So good. So if people want to run out and get your book, where is the best place for them to do that?
It's available wherever books are sold, online and in bookstores. And if they want, there's also a bunch of bonuses, because I ask over 250 questions of the reader in this book. We made a really beautiful workbook that is free.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I know a lot of people like to implement while they read. And so it's at AndreaOwen.com/MSN.
MSN.
For Make Some Noise. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And we'll link to all of the good links. We'll link to all of the things.
Okay, thank
you. In the show notes. So as you are listening to this, you can just tap on over to whatever podcast app you're listening. There should be a live link right there. And if not, you can always get it on my website. So Andrea, what is your inner voice saying to you these days?
Oh, I should have known that you were going to ask me that, Kelly.
This is your third time.
I know. Is it really? I thought it was my second time. No, you're right. It is.
I looked back. It's your third.
It's my third time. Mm-hmm. My inner voice is telling me that I am on the right track.
Oh, yes. We all are, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. That I don't have to do anything per se, but just, I'm on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are enough right now.
Thank you. As are you.
Thank you, Andrea. This has been just pure joy for me. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you're in my life.
Same. I always love coming on your show because we have such intelligent conversations, and you always make me feel really smart.
Awesome. Well, check off the list for me. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
One of my big takeaways from that conversation was there should be no regret here. There should be no shame about where we are in light of our own unlearning, because this is how we've been taught to be. And as we start to change, and as we start to understand that there are other options for us, then we can do different things. And we can do better for ourselves and for our children and for the other people that are around us, because that's what life is about. It's about evolving, like we talked about. So I want you to remember this, that no matter where you are in your journey, no matter what you have done or haven't done, today you are worthy.